The NBA draft is this Thursday, and that means trade rumors are heating up all across the league. I'm Ross, this is Arturis Fan Club, and once again, if you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button. We've got a very fun video today, a lot of fun content coming up, preparing for the draft, preparing for free agency, preparing for next season. Stick around, you won't want to miss it. So I went to Twitter, like I did last week, for your favorite Bulls memories. This time, I asked Bulls Twitter to send me their best trade scenarios for this offseason. And I want to take a look at some of them and give you my reaction, whether I think they're possible, whether I think they're, let's just say, stupid. If they're stupid, I'll let you know. And, you know, if they're just outright unrealistic or, I don't know, we'll see. There are a lot of trade proposals here. I'm going to be blunt. A lot of them are similar because we don't have a lot of assets. There's a lot of like Laurie and Kobe or Sato and Laurie. Like that's going to be a lot of these trade proposals because our assets are very limited this offseason. And we don't want to trade guys like Patrick Williams and Kobe White necessarily. Now, Kobe White is going to be in a lot of these. I personally don't want to. I'd like to avoid trading him, but that's just the nature of the beast. These are trades. You got to get rid of players to acquire players. And that's what we're going to see a lot of. Now, I do want to mention before we get too far into it that a lot of these trade scenarios require maybe a suspension of disbelief for a second, because there are some scenarios that are possible, but we'd have to make satellite exterior moves around those trades to make them work. Like if you want to trade for like Dejante Murray, for example, you'll have to do something with Al-Farouq Aminu's contract before you can do that, because I don't necessarily see the Spurs wanting to take on that contract. So I'll make sure to mention it when I can remember, but a lot of these moves, like I said, are going to require like exterior moves to make them happen. So don't get too caught up in the financials necessarily. Like I said, I'll try to point it out where I can, but for the most part, we're looking for realistic targets that the Bulls could be looking at. And I have a few in mind, and I know a lot of you guys probably have a few too. So let's take a look and see what we got. We're going back to the desktop cam. I'm right here in the corner, and here we are. Send me your best Chicago Bulls trade scenarios. Now, there's going to be a lot of funny ones, like 1-for-1, KD for Denzel. Would love to do it. Denzel Valentine's an expiring free agent. It's not going to happen. He's unrestricted. And obviously, yeah, it's Kevin Durant. But let's get into a real, actual trade scenario. Blah, 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 blah. So a lot of sign and trade for Lonzo, which it's still possible. I don't really see it because from the latest report out of Woj and Shams, the Bulls tried to trade Laurie for Lonzo at the trade deadline, and the Pelicans wanted draft capital, and the Bulls didn't feel comfortable doing that. So I still think the most realistic path to getting Lonzo Ball is an offer sheet. I do, because looking at the trade assets that we have for Lonzo, I don't see the Pelicans being interested. I don't know what they would get out of having Lauri Markkanen on their roster when they have Zion. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense for me. So I still think the most realistic path to Lonzo is the fat offer sheet that we've talked about before. If you haven't watched that video, I will leave a link for it in the description. We've talked about Lonzo at length, so there's plenty of Lonzo content on this channel for you to check out if you're interested in that. Here's one. Trade any combination of Kobe White, Thad Young, and or Tomas Satoransky for a top 10 pick. Just not going to happen. There's nobody out there who wants to do that, unfortunately. And I do think, like, trade value wise, it's actually not that far out of the realm of possibility. I just think that top 10 picks have become overrated a little bit. I know that sounds crazy, but I do think that teams are so caught up with like the potential of players that they forget that, like, well, if you do this trade, you do get 3 proven NBA players versus getting a guy out of college or out of, Europe or wherever who could flame out, could be a bust. You never know. You really don't. So, and I'm talking like at the later end of top 10. We're not talking like top 5. We're talking like 7, 8, 9. So in my personal opinion, yeah, like I think that it's a little overrated for a team to hang on to a pick that might turn into nothing or might turn into like a bench player when you could get 3 rotational pieces. But it just won't happen in today's NBA, unfortunately. That's just the nature of the beast. Westbrook for Sato, Aminu, Thad, and Kobe, and a future second round pick. This trade actually is realistic. I think the money would work on that. Trying to think. Aminu and Thad would probably. It's a lot of money. But just I don't see Westbrook. Actually, Alex said it right here. I don't think Westbrook necessarily would be the perfect fit with Zach and Vooch. I have said before that I think a guy like Westbrook who does the little things like rebounding and he passes the ball a lot, could actually be advantageous for Zach LaVine, who just needs the ball. I just think that where Westbrook is at in his career, for one, I don't know if he would want to be on the Bulls. I feel like he's at the point where like he just kind of revitalized his career with the Wizards. He might be looking to go to a contender and try to win a ring, which the Bulls are contenders. I don't want to make it sound like I'm shitting on my own team. I just don't know if, from his perspective, that's the kind of situation he would want to put himself in. And honestly, if you're going to get rid of Thaddeus Young, you got to get some sort of defense back, because our front court depth is just so depleted if we get rid of Thad Young, especially if Daniel Tice walks. So I don't like giving up Thad in this trade, and you would have to give up Thad in this trade. So that's what's going to put a nix on it for me. Which it sounds kind of dumb. Like, you don't want Westbrook because you don't want to trade Thad Young. It's contextual. Most teams would trade anything for Westbrook, but for us right now, I just don't see it being the smart long-term decision. I feel like this is the kind of decision that would cause us to end up blowing everything up in a couple years if it doesn't work out. And I don't want that to end up happening. I really don't want to see us have to quit on Zach LaVine like that. And I feel like this is the kind of trade that might force you to do that eventually. So I'm going to say no to that one. Oh, here's one that I wanted to get to. Satoransky to Pacers for Aaron Holiday. So I like Aaron Holiday. I do think that it's a little bit concerning that he has had a negative career trajectory, considering how he started his career and where it has gone since then, especially with all the injuries that the Pacers had. Like, he got plenty of opportunities last season and didn't do a whole lot with them. This is one of the rare trades where I feel like it's bad for both sides. Like, I don't see why the Pacers would want to get Tomas Satoransky necessarily for Aaron Holiday. Like, Aaron Holiday, I would say, has plenty of potential still. They were probably using him out of position last season, but at the same time, like, why would you trade for Tomas Satoransky's contract? It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And then same thing for the Bulls. It's like, Satoransky's already better right now. I don't know. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for either side. It's not a trade I would be mad at necessarily if the Bulls did do. I just don't really see why either team would go for it. Sign and trade Markkanen and Thad to the Raptors for Pascal Siakam. Don't know how the money works on that. Don't know the Raptors would even consider that. I know the Raptors are looking to add like a star player. Neither of Markkanen or Thad Young, no offense to them, they're not star players. And if they're going to trade Siakam, I feel like they can put him in a deal for a better player. It's the kind of deal that I feel like the Raptors would actually benefit from. Having Thad Young, Lauri Markkanen, I really don't know how to gauge his trade value, because I don't see much trade value in him, but I know around the league things are a little different, and people see a tall big man who can shoot it from range is super valuable. That's not for me to speculate on, but a trade I would be happy if the Bulls did. I just, once again, don't see why the Raptors would go for it. Okay, here's an actual trade machine. Okay, you want to trade half the team for Damian Lillard and Yusuf Nurkic and Robert Covington. No, the Blazers will laugh in your face if you come to them with this trade proposal. And also, trading Vooch after we just traded for him is just stupid and makes us look like we don't know what we're doing. So if we did this trade, we would have 4 players on the roster. No. Just financially, no. Not going to happen. If we were going to trade for Damian Lillard, it would happen next offseason, not this offseason. Just, once again, trying to be realistic about things here. Lauri and Kobe for Brogdon, or even Lauri and Sato for Brogdon. So I said at the jump, I'd rather not trade Kobe White. I'd rather find a way to keep him. Lauri and Sato for Brogdon would work, I think, financially. I'd have to refresh my memory. I know Brogdon is up for a new contract, so this would be like a plan B if we can't get Lonzo, like Billy said here, only if we can't get Lonzo. I like this idea. I do. I like Brogdon as a solid plan B if we can't get Lonzo. I like the idea of packaging Laurie on a sign and trade with Tomas Satoransky to get a player. It all just comes back to like, what is Lauri Markkanen's true trade value, and how do teams value him around the league? You know, like if Brogdon's not going to get a new contract, it might make sense to get whatever you can for him. But like, how much money are you signing Lauri Markkanen for in that scenario? Because if you're already going to let Brogdon walk because you're scared of the money, why would you give that money to Lauri Markkanen instead? You get where my mind's at? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Doing like a sign and trade for a sign and trade, which is the same thing we just talked about with Lonzo, is like, I don't know. I don't know why a team would go for that with the unknown of Lauri Markkanen. Like, I still, once again, I'll keep going back to it. Like, we're going to go through these trade proposals, but I do think Lauri Markkanen will end up walking in restricted free agency. I think a team will offer him a certain amount of money, and the Bulls will just be like, we're not going to match that. You can sign him to that much money. I just don't see a team executing a sign and trade for Lauri Markkanen with the unknown of what his future could end up being. Giving up assets for Lauri Markkanen, it seems like the ship has sailed on that. If we were going to get anything for Lauri, it feels like that should have happened at the trade deadline, and we kind of bet on Lauri potentially having a good second half of the season to up his trade value, and it just never happened. Here we go, Jalen Brunson and Kleba for Lauri, Sato in a second. Now, okay, here's a trade that I feel like both teams would be like, yes, I will do that. The Mavericks need additional scoring and defensive help. Lauri's more scoring, Sato's more defensive help. You got to throw a pick in there because them on their own won't get it done. Brunson is a nice bench piece. I don't know if he necessarily could be our starting point guard right off the bat. He's probably he's probably an upgrade over Kobe White, especially because Kobe White's going to start the season injured and won't even be available. And then you get Kleba in the trade too, which is nice value for getting rid of who we just talked about, Lauri Markkanen. I don't know how the money works on that. I don't know if that's too much incoming money for the Mavs. And once again, we're talking sign and trade with Lauri, so it depends on what they want to give him. And you know, like I said at the beginning of the video, there's a suspension of disbelief here, where whatever the Bulls do, like if they're going to sign and trade Lauri Markkanen and Sato, and then they're going to take on some contract, like there is going to have to be some other move that happens to facilitate this trade, number one. And number two, you know, we still want to spend some money in free agency like that. The Bulls have been talked about all pretty much nonstop in the last 2 weeks by Woj and Shams about like teams that are going to be spending money in free agency this offseason. So a trade that could potentially help us, we have to keep in mind that other moves will have to be made to facilitate it. But with all of that said, I like this trade. I do this trade. I'd still want to try to give Lonzo a fat offer sheet in this scenario. And if you could get Brunson, Kleba, and end up with Lonzo, I mean, that's a pretty good offseason. We've talked a little bit about how Lonzo Ball is kind of more of a wing player anyway. So, I mean, in this scenario, you're keeping Kobe White, you're getting Jalen Brunson, you can run a 3-guard lineup with Lonzo kind of playing as a wing. And you could either slide in Brunson or Kobe White into the starting lineup, depending on, you know, whether you're looking for a little more playmaking or a little more scoring, a little more defense. You can really play with that lineup a lot. And that's just scratching the surface with Kleba. So like, I like this trade a lot. I do think that this is a possible trade, and I would be happy to see it happen. So first one that I think this is the first one so far where I'm like, yeah, I feel like everyone would agree to that. Lauri and Sato for Lonzo and Josh Hart. Once again, we've talked about this. I keep going over it. I just don't know what the Pelicans really want in terms of a trade for Lonzo, and I don't know if Lauri Markkanen is it. Okay, so hear me out. We signed DeMar, we trade him. Okay, we're done with that. This is not gonna happen. You don't sign a free agent and then trade it's not how that works. Markkanen, Aminu, Sato for Dejante Murray, and Jakob Poeltl. I don't know why the Spurs would take on Aminu's contract. I know he's an expiring. They might be looking forward to next offseason. Also, mind you, I don't know what the Spurs are doing in general. My guy Rusty Buckets just put out a really long video, a great video actually, about Greg Popovich and kind of his hubris and the downfall of the Spurs. And I encourage everyone to go check that video out. And when I talk about what the Spurs are doing, I don't know what I'm talking about because they don't know what they're doing, it seems like. So when I sit here and say like, oh, well, this trade doesn't make a lot of sense for the Spurs also don't make a lot of sense in general. So a trade like this, they might just do, even though it looks stupid and unrealistic, they might actually do it. So, I mean, I'd make the phone call, I'd pitch it to him. But once again, I don't know why they would take on Aminu's contract. They don't have to do that. Dejante Murray is locked up. There is no, it's not like a situation where you're trying to get value for a player who's leaving anyway. You know, there's really no point in this trade. Now, if we throw in a pick, things look a lot different. I think that you have to throw in a pick to get rid of Aminu's contract. So you throw in a pick, this trade looks a lot different, and I would be very happy with it. Either way, I would be very happy with this trade. I've been a fan of Dejante Murray. You guys know that. I've talked about him in another video. Once more, you should go check that out. So Dejante Murray is a player that I am absolutely interested in trying to acquire. I don't know what's going on with the Spurs. Like, what are they doing? What do they want? What do they value? You know? I know Lauri Markkanen was tied to the Spurs in some free agency rumors, so maybe they are interested in him, and maybe they would try to get some value for Dejante Murray for whatever reason. I don't know why they want to trade him. That's the thing I still don't get. So, financially, I think this works, and in a world that we're already living in, not in a vacuum, but in our real world, this could probably happen because I don't know that the Spurs even know what the plan is long term. And maybe the idea there is like they want to blow it up and they want to just get contracts off the books, which would make sense to get Aminu and Sato, who, they'll both be expiring next season. But Markkanen, I don't know. Is he a part of that long-term rebuild? I don't see it and I don't get it. Maybe that's their vision. Maybe that's what they want to do. So I don't know. I'll stop talking about it, but I don't know. Here's another Siakam trade that includes Trey Brown Jr. Now you might be talking a little bit. Okay, so before we didn't have Trey Brown Jr. in that trade proposal. You might be talking. We're keeping Thad Young this time, and we're trading Laurie Sato and Trey Brown Jr. plus a pick swap for Pascal Siakam. Now, this is a little bit more realistic, I would say. Trey Brown Jr., I feel like, has a lot of trade value because he is young, has shown a lot of potential, and is kind of waiting for his opportunity to really show what he can do. So if we're talking like this year's second round pick, this trade could probably happen. I don't necessarily see why the Raptors would do it once again, because I feel like they could get more for Siakam in a bigger trade, like packaging him in with a couple other players to get like a star. But no, I mean, like I think that's realistic if the Raptors are unable to make a trade like that happen. So this is the kind of trade that it's a trade of opportunity. Of like, if the Raptors are searching around for a trade that includes Siakam, they can't get it done. You make this phone call, you say like, hey, I hear you want to move Siakam. I've got a few players that you might like. So that's the kind of trade I could see happening. And you might still have to throw Thad Young in there too, unfortunately. We'd have to see, but that could happen. Crazier things have happened in the NBA. I'm not going to call that unrealistic. I think that's more realistic than the Laurie Thad Sato trade. 38 plus Sato for 25. Okay. I've talked about this a lot too, of trading up in the draft. I like this idea a lot. It depends who's on the board at the time. This is a draft day trade. Like, this is something that you pull off during the draft. You call a team that has 25, which I forget. Let's see who has number 25. Was it the Clippers? 25 is the Clippers. Yeah. So this is a trade that I could definitely see happening. The Clippers have been tied to Satoransky for reasons unknown to me, besides the fact that they need a point guard. I mean, I get why they're interested in Tomas Satoransky. I think he's a good player. I just don't understand why they would trade their draft pick for him necessarily. I don't know. I'd be happy to do it. I would love to move up in the draft and try to get like Miles McBride, or maybe, 25 might be a bit of a reach for Quentin Grimes, but I would still be happy with Quentin Grimes no matter what. And if you trade Sato if you look at it that way, like you're trading Tomas Satoransky essentially for Quentin Grimes or for Miles McBride, two players that I've talked about extensively. That's a trade I'd be happy with. So the Clippers, Actually, you know what? I take back what I said. I think that this trade would make sense for both sides. You know, the Clippers need a point guard. The Clippers need veteran depth, and Tomas Satoransky is the perfect veteran depth point guard, you know, option that they could get this offseason. So I like that trade. Kobe, Thad, Aminu, Laurie, and maybe Troy Brown Jr. and future picks for De'Aaron Fox and Marvin Bagley. Once again, this is a trade that in a vacuum, I would say like, why? Who would agree to that? But then, you know, you take a step back and realize, okay, we're talking about the Sacramento Kings here. Yeah, they might do that trade. I don't want to give up Troy Brown Jr. necessarily, but I mean, getting De'Aaron Fox is like worth it. And Bagley, you know, despite his struggles, still think that a change of scenery will be very beneficial for him. It's the kind of trade that like, you're gutting your roster, which hurts a lot. You're getting back a really good player in De'Aaron Fox, like a very good player. But is it worth it to gut the roster like this? I don't know. I know I'd be happy about it in the short term. I don't know how I'd feel about it in the long term. Because you're giving up Thad Young, who is a big part of our front court. You're giving up Troy Brown Jr., who I still feel like is wildly, massively underrated. And is going to be a big part of our rotation next season if he sticks around. And once again, that's maybe a little bit of sunk cost fallacy on my part, but you already traded assets to get Troy Brown Jr. So it's not just you trading Troy Brown Jr. for this player. You got to think of it like you're also trading all of the other assets we traded for Troy Brown Jr. in this trade, because you're saying that you're comfortable with giving up that many assets for this. I mean, Bagley is kind of a throw-in, but for these two players. And I don't know if I feel comfortable with that. I don't know if that's the kind of move that Arturas Karnisovas is trying to do this offseason. We've already made like the roster changing trade, you know? I feel like we're kind of beyond the point of trading this many players. We've got to keep some of the rotation around. You know what I mean? Like the core is still Zach LaVine, Nikola Vucevic, Patrick Williams, but like you have to keep guys like Troy Brown Jr. if you want to win games. You know, guys who are underrated, guys who do the little things. They play with intensity. They play with grit. Troy Brown Jr. is one of those guys, and you don't have to pay a lot of money to keep him. So those are the kind of players that you have to keep around to win in the regular season with. Now, when you get to the playoffs, yeah, Zach LaVine, De'Aaron Fox, and Nikola Vucevic, that's a core you can win with. But you got to win in the regular season too, and giving up this much depth, just it would feel shitty, you know? So not totally realistic, I would say, from the Bulls' perspective, but maybe from the Kings' perspective. Little different change of perspective there. Kobe White and Sato for Lonzo Ball. Yeah, we've seen that a bunch. Brogdon. Miles Turner is a guy who I've talked about and I would love to try to acquire. Once again, I don't know if Lauri Markkanen and Kobe White could get it done. That might be like a Lauri Markkanen, Kobe White, Thad Young kind of trade for Brogdon and Turner, which I would be thrilled with. We'd have to throw in a pick or two. But I would be absolutely thrilled if we were able to get Brogdon and Turner, flipping like Lauri, Kobe, Thad Young. I don't know. Yeah, no, I'd be that trade right there plus a couple picks. I would be thrilled with. Once again, a player in Miles Turner who I feel like is massively underrated and would help us so much defensively. Pairing him with Nikola Vucevic because he can play the four. I think that would work a lot. And in that scenario, you can let Daniel Tice walk too. Here we go. Whoa. Okay. 2 picks. So we're back to Siakam. We're back to talking about ways that the Raptors could try to get some value for Siakam. I don't necessarily like 2 first rounders. We've already given up 2 first rounders. You know, I'm not gonna spend too much time on this one. I'm gonna move on because we've talked about Siakam a lot already, and just say, once again, it's probably not the smartest for us to gut our roster for one player. And Aaron Baines is trash. I don't want Aaron Baines, so no on that one. Okay, we're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel here. We're getting to the trades that we've already kind of talked about. Sign and trade Tice to Dallas for Dorian Finney-Smith. Dallas needs defense. Dorian's a good 3-and-D guy. I don't know why it would be a sign and trade. Tice is an unrestricted free agent. We do have his bird rights, so you know maybe it's the cap situation for the Mavs. But generally don't really see sign and trades with unrestricted free agents like that. So just gonna move on from that one. Unfortunately, I like the idea of Dorian Finney-Smith. I just don't see how that would happen with, once again, the assets that we have currently. And like I said, Tice is going to walk. He's an unrestricted free agent. Like, he'll get paid. Someone will give him some money. So it's just not a situation that he necessarily needs to agree to, and not a situation that I think the Bulls would even approach him with. Paddy Mills is another guy who gets kicked around a lot. You know, in terms of like a veteran point guard option for the Bulls, Paddy Mills, great. Dejante Murray, great. But once again, don't really see what the Spurs get out of it. I don't know. Who knows, man? There's a lot to say about what the Spurs are doing these days, and I have no idea. Okay, well, I think we've covered most of the serious ones. You'll get the Felicios for Lillards. That'll be a lot of my mentions when I bring up trade scenarios. But for now, we're going to go ahead and say most of these probably not realistic. A couple of these I could see happening. I don't know where the Bulls are in terms of trades right now. You know, I don't know if Arturas Karnisovas and Mark Eversley want to gut the roster any more than they already have. I don't know what they could get for Lauri Markkanen. Thad Young, I feel like, is a guy that you want to keep around because he has such a strong relationship with Zach LaVine, and you need front court depth. We're so desperate for some defense on next to Nikola Vucevic in the paint. So getting rid of Thad Young it's a problem because there are so many different things that he does that you will have to replicate with whichever players you're taking back, and it's not easy to replicate what Thad Young does, especially coming off such a great season for him. But that's what you go back to get good players. You got to trade good players, and that's the NBA. So I'm not totally sure what where the Bulls are in terms of trades right now in their minds, but I feel like this was a fun exercise to take a look at what's realistic and what isn't. And you know, like we keep saying, aside from like Patrick Williams, Zach LaVine, Nikola Vucevic, like everyone kind of is on the table. It's just how far do you want to take it, and how much are you willing to give up to get back? So I think I've covered most of the good ones, and I think we've gotten a good idea of kind of where the future of the Bulls could lie. Which I keep saying is in the margins, right? Because we have the core already. We've got the core. We've got the Zach LaVine. We've got Nikola Vucevic. Now it's putting the auxiliary players around them to put them in the best positions to succeed. So guys like Thad Young and Troy Brown Jr. are those kind of players. Giving them up for, you know, one other borderline star could screw your future up. It could. Those are the kind of trades that teams make and end up mortgaging their future for right now, and then they don't win anything right now, and it just ends up looking bad in the long run. There are players that you can trade those guys for that I feel like will upgrade your roster, you know, acquiring another star. But at the end of the day, I feel like what the Bulls need to do this offseason is get the point guard, Lonzo Ball is plan A, and prepare themselves for next offseason when a lot of money will come off the books, and you could make a run at a superstar like Kevin Durant or Kawhi Leonard. So as much as I want to get excited about all these flashy trades this offseason, I do think it makes more sense to have a more grounded free agency spending spree in terms of like giving a 1-year deal to like a TJ McConnell kind of player, and then trying to get Lonzo Ball on that offer sheet. And then next offseason, when you get Satoransky, Aminu, even Thad Young off the books, then you can start to look at who is a true star to pair with Zach LaVine and Nikola Vucevic. I think this video has been long enough. I have talked at length about these trades. I'm going to let you guys go. Thank you again for watching. If you made it this far, you should be subscribed, because why the hell not? You watch 30 minutes of me, you could watch a couple more videos, and you don't want to miss them because we got some good stuff. I got a full draft preview coming up in the next couple of days, so don't miss that. And I will talk to you guys very soon.